Thank you and welcome for the SDC2017 conference. This is the second edition of the AR/VR panel. We did that last year and we had very good feedback that we should do it again. This year I'm extremely proud to have a great set of panelists from Unity, Qualcomm and Google. You can't do much better for that kind of panel. They've been briefed. They will get tough questions, challenging questions. If they don't answer the questions, I will keep digging until they answer. So I think you're going to have a lot of learnings today, and the focus is really about insights for you, both about what's not obvious about AR/VR, some of the mistakes you could be avoiding, and some of the things you could do to make your product even better. So before we go through the introduction, just to have a feel, how many of you are doing AR/VR product today? Okay, good. And who is planning to do it in the next 12 months? All right, good, thank you. So maybe 1 or 2 minutes each, a quick introduction, your name, your company, why you're excited about AR/VR.
So I'm Brad, and I have AR/VR, or XR as we call it, Unity product. And I think the thing that I'm really most excited about is how we're going to solve a lot of the product design challenges moving forward. And so that's kind of the focus of mine as we're looking at what, how do we engage with our community and how to move forward. And I think we'll probably get into that as we go.
A lot. Said.
Hello everyone, my name is Bakadir. I'm leading the XR business in Qualcomm. I think I don't know if I need to introduce that. XR really is part of our core kind of strategy businesses for the future. We're not debating if it's going to happen. We know it's been well. It's just when. So we are building all those what we need to get in there, and we're taking it step by step. And I'm happy to and excited to have more discussion with the team here. And also, I mean, if there are any questions, looking forward to that.
And good afternoon, my name is Jeff Chen. I'm a product manager at Google. I am working on the standalone VR platform over at Google. And what excites me about just the general VR space is about bridging gaps and connecting people so that they can access places that are largely inaccessible to immerse themselves into a new environment that they couldn't experience otherwise. And then on the AR side, I think this is also an incredible opportunity where we're at this cusp of presenting all this metadata that has been created over the last decade through this information era to make it accessible and bridge it into more of a immersive medium so that people can experience it directly through their senses as opposed to interrupted with a physical device that kind of blocks that view. So it's going to be interesting, I think, in the next few years to see how the technologies evolve and how we can overcome some of the technology blockers. But at the same time, I think it's just an opportunity for some new players to emerge and figure out how you create a very exciting product and experience.
All right, thank you. So just for terminology, we are going to use XR for AR and VR. So we don't keep saying AR/VR, we can just say XR. Two of the three panelists use XR directly in their introduction, so I think they have the majority already on using that terminology.
Actually, that's great, by the way, because the first time we used XR, we were worried we were creating another acronym just to confuse people.
Oh, you have?
But it's great to see that everyone just is like taking it. So either by coincidence or not, that's great.
So I want to bounce on what you said about it's not a question of if, but when. What do you think is the biggest challenge for it to be not so fast? And what can you do in your company? You can start at the company level. What are you doing to make sure that we can accelerate?
Actually, all XR is challenges. Can you hear me now better? Oh, so all XR is about challenges, really. If you look on how any VR, if it's just example of what VR today, because I think when we look into AR and VR, the way I was in one of the talks from one of the big professors on VR from Austria, and the simplest way he explained XR is like, you know what, you have VR on one side, on one extreme, and you have AR on the other extreme. And just in between, you have some virtual and like some augmented, but it's a mix of it. And just to simplify it, is like as we go in today to like get into that device or like the ultimate device in XR, I think we're starting from VR. So VR is a stepstone and eventually getting into the more complicated device. Now, to understand what we're doing about it, and to my point about the challenges, let's look first what makes even an XR device. And just in the presentation earlier, I think it was summarized as well pretty well. There are three main areas. You want to create that immersive experience that is equivalent to the reality. The best way to have that is dealing with the visuals. You need really high density, a lot of pixels in there to make sure that whatever you see in the virtual world is equivalent to what we see in the real one. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. The second part is sound. It has to be intuitive. It has to be natural. Just imagine if you're watching something and there's a plane flying over your head, and as you walk in, the plane is moving. How is that sound playing out in reality? You want to see that as well in the virtual world, or if you have a mix, you want to exactly emulate that same thing. Are we there yet? Definitely not. The third leg for any XR business is definitely interaction. And again, we want it to be intuitive. We want it to be natural interaction. I don't know if you've ever put a VR in your head. Have all of you used a VR before? Who hasn't? Perfect.
Well, everyone has. Very good.
That's really great. So if you've used a VR, and I don't know if you watched stuff in front of you, didn't you have that natural way of wanting to touch it or to push it or something like that? I had that. I mean, that's a feeling. When I give it to kids, I went to a school just like to introduce VR to some kids. They all wanted to use to touch the animals, touch something. I think that's natural. We want to have that. We want to have definitely everything about interactions, anything about the world where you are. You're not just in a virtual world. I'm in a virtual with all interaction with the items, or I'm in a mixed world, still I want those interactions. So if we look to those three items, each of them, really when you tell me what we're doing about it.
I thought you forgot about the question, so that's good.
Definitely, I'm with you. So coming back, when we understand the challenges, because as they say in the, I think wisdom era, I don't know if we're still in that era or not, is if you understand the problem, you solve 50%. Yep. So understanding really those problems is very key for us. Now, for the visual, how are we going to solve that? We know what needs to be done. I mean, you have to have really, as we said, you have to have that good quality close to reality, which means you have to have a lot of density there from pixels. The frame per second needs to be as high as possible. I don't know if you go back to 4K 30 and then 60 when 60 comes up, that's great. Now in VR, because you have everything is close to your eye, right? And just ask yourself, what is the resolution of your eye? That's what we need to get to. Are we close to that? No. So there is an element of display quality. There is an element of capability to render that data in that high density of pixels. There is an element of, hey, I'm moving. They go with the controllers and all of that. So I'm just moving my head. I'm moving my eyes somewhere. I need to make sure that I have this continuous kind of immersive experience, and the video is, there is no delay. I don't need to feel delay. If not, what happens? People get sick. Unfortunately, I don't, for some reason, but a lot of people I see, I mean, as soon as we put, if there is any just single, like, seconds or milliseconds, I'm not talking about seconds of delay, it gets sick. It's easy to find out. So to get into, we got finally, now in Qualcomm, where we are today, we're saying we're not there yet, but we are one step ahead, right? So the step we are with the latest platform that we have, we're getting like, motion to photon kind of, we're getting to 16 milliseconds. That's a huge, that's definitely getting closer. Is it enough again? No, it's not. But we're taking it step by step because there are a lot of elements that we need to fix, a lot of them that our partners need to fix, from display, from sensors, but we're getting it step by step. So that's just the visual.
Yep.
Sound, likewise, I think we're going to have a lot more discussion to each of those areas, but this is what we're doing. It's the same approach. Every platform, and why we're using every platform again? because we believe that VR is mainly driven by mobile. So we have all the pieces there. Qualcomm we have all the pieces. We need to tweak them a little bit to get them to VR. And I think we're going to get into more details.
Oh, I will challenge you on the mobile part, but I want to give a chance for Brad to also answer the same question.
So you want to, I think in all of that, I sort of lost the root of the question. You want to rephrase the
question is, what do you think is blocking XR to go fast? And what are you doing at Unity to accelerate it?
So I think, I would almost encompass all the things that my colleague here was talking about in terms of content. And so I don't think that there's actually, the resolution of the eye. I don't think there's technological barriers to really starting to see really great content, or the killer app that we all kind of dance around. I think that technological advancements will make experiences more immersive, will make cyber sickness less of an issue, and so more people will be able to kind of come onto this platform. But in reality, the big challenges that developers who are really driving this face is fragmentation in platforms, and within platforms. If we're talking about mobile, we're talking about so many different form factors, different capabilities, and so it's about how do we handle that? Because even though we're starting to see, and we can kind of see a curve that says there's going to be enough saturation that this is going to be able to prop up this great content ecosystem, and therefore a good user ecosystem. The challenges are how do I achieve that saturation within a totally fragmented market? How do I do what at Unity we kind of aim for this build once, ship everywhere kind of thing. But that's really challenging when all this technology is changing so fast. And the challenge beyond that, so even stepping further away from the sort of the technological side of things, is what I mentioned briefly at the beginning, is the product design challenges. Is how do we standardize UI? How do we have the UI be consistent across devices that have vastly different input mechanisms? If I have a mobile AR phone, or I'm trying to simulate the same experience on a VR headset, or have people act between them, how do we make this intuitive, and how do we have a shared language between these things? And I think we are not able to really understand these problems yet, because if you look at mobile AR, which is just blowing up now, we're learning that people are not really willing to hold their arms up that much yet. But it's who knows really where that line is. Maybe it's that the app isn't compelling enough for people to want to hold their arms up. But we're all sort of starting to figure this out. And I think one thing that's really going to drive this is building this community. And so the thing I think I'm probably most excited about from Unity's perspective is not necessarily like our market share in VR or AR right now, but rather like how many people we have involved, sharing knowledge, and being able to hop on each other's projects and understand how things work, because they've all learned using in this sort of the same software ecosystem. So yeah, does that cover basically?
Thank you. Actually, I want to touch just very quickly on the fragmentation. Do you think the fragmentation is what's the problem today, or you want to plan for this problem that's for sure going to happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, fragmentation is definitely an issue already today. If you look at even within, let's say, the mobile AR on the iOS side, you have only a few sort of form factors you have to tackle, and with AR Core, they've kept that fairly narrow, but even there, capabilities are going to vary, especially as more devices come out. Once we see headsets, but even if you look within VR, for instance, let's look within just Oculus's range, right? We have all the way from Gear VR to Rift-powered devices, and that can have any sort of hardware powering it, right? So how do I build? How do I build my? I of course want to maximize, right, what I'm doing on every form factor I'm targeting, and I can't play as fast and loose as I did with games and experiences before. I can't risk really dropping frame rate. So we sort of need to look at this in a whole different way to make sure that people can have maximum saturation, maximum amount of immersive content or detailed content in their experiences, but still at the same time kind of be accountable to all the devices that users might be experiencing these apps.
And we'll probably touch on that, but that's even before you start to have creative form factors for AR. Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, so I think if we look at the PC market from yesteryear, from like the 80s and 90s, I think you can find an interesting analog where devices were too expensive. There wasn't enough to do with them, and then largely the technology could have been perceived as not good enough. There's not enough memory, not enough storage, and therefore you couldn't deliver interesting use cases. So if we look at distilling it into those three pillars of the virtuous cycle that you need for any new category to be created, from a technology standpoint, I think Syed had already mentioned plenty, so I won't go into there. But from a user experience perspective, I think there is just not enough to do in VR at the moment. Most of the applications that have been developed so far are kind of novel. Like you do feel like you're immersed in either a Kentucky Fried Chicken or in a power plant or a Star Trek. I think Bridge was one of the games that they had made. And it's interesting, but
Bridge Crew.
Oh, Bridge Crew, thank you. And these types of games are just scratching the surface. And VR, for the moment, is still too socially isolating. It's a very solitary experience, and I think Bridge Crew was one of those first apps that did show the opportunity and the potential of having multi-users in one session to facilitate, oh, I'm feeling more included, there's a community. It's like that early groundbreaking of having like chat for PCs back in the day when you realize I can contact another human? Wow. And so there needs to be a little bit more of experimentation in trying out new use cases from a software point of view. And then when it comes to the business aspects of it, honestly, I think the cost to adoption is still too high at the moment. If you look at the tethered VR devices right now, you're talking about $399, $499, $599. You could buy an entire PC for that amount. But in order to have the right experience, you still have to drop another $2,000 or so, which is great for, don't get me wrong, for the hardware ecosystem and whatnot, but for your mainstream consumer, that's just way too far above reach. Which is why I think from the Google vantage point, we have been very, and have been, and continue to be very excited about the mobile slide. So we just announced our Daydream View headset that accompanies as an accessory, and I think that's going to be a lot of people's first opportunity for a relatively modest price point to experience VR, and for those who are inclined to be willing to shell out additional dollars to further go up the experiential stack. So with the announcement from Facebook and Oculus about the Oculus Go, I think that's also a very nice introduction of a new milestone that helps people get into VR without having to spend a significant chunk of change. So those three primary factors, I think it's going to be the totality of all those working in concert that will help catalyze the growth of the VR industry.
So I like what you said about social. So we don't have Oculus here, so let me ask very bluntly, have you tried the space of Facebook where you can interact with others live in VR?
Spaces.
Spaces, yes.
Yeah.
You have?
I have not.
All right. So guys, what did you think about the social element of it? Do you think this is getting it right, or what could they do better?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it was a common complaint very early on with VR, there was a lot of people saying that it's very, like, antisocial. Like, you put on your HMD and then you're by yourself and, excluding the possibility of a roommate watching you while you're in there. There's really nothing going on, but I think it actually is, really, really social because, having sort of this idea of an immersive conversation, like it would go from maybe telephone to, the sort of the video-based chat, and that was a sort of a game changer in how we chat as well. And then, now we can actually sort of interact with each other and feel more present. For anyone who hasn't tried it, Spaces or Big Screen or Rec Room, when you're in there, even if you have a ridiculous avatar or something like that, you immediately feel like the person that you're talking to is like right next to you. And I think that's a really, really compelling use case for VR.
Yeah, I think I just want to add one thing. The social aspect is definitely important, but when I think about VR, I'm thinking about different use cases, right? I think VR, the way I look at it, it's going to change many things in our lives. It's going to change in how we perceive life today. It's going to change how we are playing. It's going to change how we are learning. It's going to change how we are communicating, be it social or not. Actually, if I'm learning, I don't need to be social. I'm learning. And it's funny, some of our customers come in you hear all type of use cases that really wouldn't have thought about, like wine tasting with VR, or in China there was this you get to this store and there's a milk, it's called milk, and they put a VR in there. You know what? They show you how that milk is being produced. Interesting. Or there was this company that said, you know what, we get 20% efficiency on our manufacturing employees because when we give them a video to watch on how to do things, and I'm sure you guys do it in your companies, when you get that video about anytime, you have to do that, but HR is asking you to do something, you watch it literally, do you pay attention or do you do like I do? You put it there in one screen and you're doing something else. Or push next. We did, all of us, we did this, but here's what they did. They put VR because they isolate you. VR, you pay, all your attention is in that video. You will learn how to do it. You can touch your phone, you can look to anything else, you cannot look to Nicolas, I don't know, you just really focus on that. So I think definitely social aspect is important. Definitely there are different use cases, but for sure VR is going to change. Now, what is missing, and to your point, you guys about content, definitely I agree with the problem with fragmentation. The pie, guys, is small. We need to make sure that we get consolidation in there. And really hoping, like you guys in Unity help on that. We are really looking at you guys and hoping as well you focus on the right platform. Because it will be hard. Because everyone will say, yeah, it's my platform. It's the best one. So we need to fix that in the industry. We need to develop to help you from that front. But on the other side as well, we need a lot of things from you. For me, it's like one is focus, and second thing is most of the content, and a lot of people from the user perspective, we have a problem with retention of the user. I don't know if you're getting the same aspect, because you get the first time the VR, you play it for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, what's next? Then it goes to your shelf, right? That's one problem. We need new content. This is one aspect. The second aspect is we need very specific experience on the content that you cannot get anywhere else but in XR. Because if I just watch Netflix, this is my view. Just if I want to watch a 2D video, why would VR? My TV is good for that. Actually, I have sound, spatial sound, I have everything, and I don't have to put anything in my ears. But if for the application that you're writing or you're redeveloping, it has to offer something that you cannot get anywhere else but in an XR. That's important. The quality, simplicity, just like you mentioned, technology might not be the problem. What we have today is enough. Right? We can do a lot of damage just with whatever we have. Right? So we just need it to be very good experience with whatever is there. 1K by 1K pixel quality per eye is good enough. I mean, if you try those, it's good enough. We just need that content, that killer application. That is really
So we talked about killer application, retention, we talked about it yesterday, but I think you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two key factors to this, which I alluded to briefly before, which is having community and knowledge sharing, right? So I mean, so no one learns anything in a bubble. If someone learns a really hard lesson, if you were around, with this last wave of VR development that started, a few years ago, there was all this. Okay, you can't do this. You can do this. You really shouldn't do this, and then people would break each other's rules because they realized they learned the intricacies. And I think there was a lot of people who were frustrated who were maybe working with VR 10, 20 years ago who were like, yeah, we did that dummy kind of thing. But there's a lot of things that are really new and a lot of really new rules to be figured out. And so that is one huge aspect. And I think the other aspect to sort of propel everyone forward at the same time is being able to iterate really quickly. Being able to be creative, and a big part of that as well is being able to be in this sort of a risk-free environment. We never really have a truly risk-free environment, but if I can say, okay, I've got this crazy idea, I'm going to try it. It'll take me less than a day, right? Or I'm going to build up this whole system and maybe even an entire app, and that fails, kind of thing. The interesting thing now is having tooling like, oh, say Unity or something like that, is you could go and develop, a full application, or iterate on an idea for a long time. And even if that entire thing fails, you still have your knowledge, you still have your tools, your scripts, and everyone you work with, you can kind of jump on and try again. And it's going to take a lot of that with VR and AR as we figure this out.
I think one thing we discussed is in AR, VR, everyone today is pioneers. We're really trying things, we're trying to be creative. We haven't found a killer app yet. I think that what's important is to give a chance to create, right? What do you think, Jeff, is going to make it into an application that people will want to go back to? And here, when we talk about mobile, it's a very smart idea to kickstart VR, no doubt. You already have a mobile with all the sensors you need and the display and so on. But at the end, it's a very friction-full experience to have to start your VR. What could be this kind of applications or use case that makes people want to keep using VR?
Right. Yeah. So one of the initial use cases that I think is interesting from a consumer vantage point is about video playback. But if you look at the numbers for video playback for VR, like the 360 videos, they're nice and they drive a lot of the mobile video playback. But I think to Saeed's point, like you could have that experience in an alternative format on your TV screen. But actually, there's what we have like VR 180. This is a new video format concept that YouTube has already announced publicly, where they have stereoscopic cameras that are capturing scenes with two 3D cameras that are then rendering that into 3D depth perceived video that you can watch. So when you watch these videos, not only is it better curated from the director's point of view so that you know what you should be watching instead of constantly turning around finding where the action is, but you're more immersed in it. But it's not just the production, like commercial production level that I'm talking about. I'm talking about consumer oriented devices, cameras that will be made available by manufacturers, where you could take videos of your children or of your pets, of your family, and to share that stereoscopic video with family that may be across the ocean, across the country somewhere, to add that sense of presence or immersion into a memory or into an event that you otherwise would not have been able to access. I think for the initial consumer use case, that it's going to be a very interesting one to watch, which I'm fairly bullish about. And then the other one from perhaps a productivity point of view is going to be more along the lines of education and collaboration. Because today, with the tools that we have available, we can do remote telepresence type of face-to-face conversations, but they're largely about like, okay, let me talk to you on a screen so I can kind of figure out that I'm looking at you so you know what I look like, but I'm still going to another medium to work on that PowerPoint presentation or to look at that CAD file in a very 2D format. But rather, in order to enhance that either collaboration experience or the education, to be fully immersed with your coworker, with a fellow student, and working around the same space so that you can actually learn or cooperate with one another. I think those two are going to be really interesting usage models for us to look at for VR in the later part of this year and into 2018. So I definitely pay a lot of attention to that. It's not just about the content consumption, but it's also the user interaction. So that's where like controllers become a really important part. They have to be intuitive, easy to use, you can't have to fumble for it, and they have to be very responsive. So if you look at it from those points of view, I think that's really where you need to solve for to make it interesting.
I think the example you give about video is very good. Because I think it's one of the failures of trying to do a video in VR where you don't know where to look, and the director has to figure out many things that could come from your mind. And what I like about what you're doing with Video 180 is actually you're solving this. You're making clear what the action, where the action is coming from, yet you get the advantage of being immersed into the action, or semi-immersed. But at least you feel like you can watch around, but the director knows where you're going to look. And I feel like this is nearly a lessons learned from what couldn't work in VR well, and that's how it could be fixed. And it doesn't look like it looks like a simple fix, but it takes time to really mature to a point where the medium works. Do you have other examples like this of something that was so not working and something that looks simple made it really attractive?
Well, I mean, there's two aspects, and I don't think the door is closed on kind of what's possible there. But there's two sides. There's the creators learning how to telegraph things properly, right? So if you look at like cinema back in the day, we sort of had to slowly teach people, like when this was an appropriate time to laugh, what a flashback in time was, and all this cinematic language developed. Now there's kind of a new language with this stuff, and then there's on top of it, so there's the creators, figuring this stuff out, and then there's the users learning how to interact with it or how to receive it, kind of thing. And so I don't know, how far along the road we are there, but I think when we talk about retention and stuff for things even besides video, is that we're slowly sort of teaching our, everyone at once, how to stay in these things longer and, sort of building that muscle. So it's possible that, like if VR hit a certain level of saturation and someone released this app that might just totally be a killer app, it just might be that like, the market isn't necessarily ready there. Like if you had done some sort of, with a smartphone, if you had done some super social Instagram app kind of thing, like right off the bat or something like that, maybe people would be uncomfortable, let's say, with like spending all day on their phone or, getting their picture taken or taking pictures of other people constantly. That's probably a terrible example. But, as the sort of the general user base kind of matures, really different things are possible. We can expect people to stay in for longer lengths of time and actually can present different experiences based on it.
Now back to the question. Can you think of something that was not working at all in a VR or AR experience, and something that looks like a simple fix made it so much better? And I like your analogy of movies, where you have to train people what is a transition or going back in time as a flash memory. Do you have an example that's analog to that?
I think with VR, there's a few. There's at the beginning, like for instance, spatial audio, right? It's like one thing, like any sort of signifier when people realize that right off the bat with like room scale VR or something, that having content like out of people's reach, they wouldn't necessarily like walk over there and like interact with it, right? You had to start by like presenting things close, right? And then once you could start to teach them this language by reaching out. If anyone has watched someone in their first room scale VR experience, they're probably gonna like reach out and the thing will be like way over here. And I'm like, okay, I don't get it. I guess I can't interact with that sort of thing. So as this goes on, I'm trying to think of an exact
Yeah, I think one of the things just coming to the video, and it wasn't our idea, it's just like one of the partners that worked out. When it comes to an ask on technology, is rather than the user looking where is the action coming to the user by using eye tracking.
Dynamically.
Right, where the gaze is. You're tracking the gaze, and eventually you would present to that person. If I'm looking there, you would present where you're wanting. If I move this side, where my head is at, and you know exactly what I'm looking at. So that's just one example. I think it would be open to all the ecosystem. Once you know where the user is, like their gaze, what is it? Where's their foveated area? I think you can do a lot of things. I mean, that's what I eventually.
So yesterday we had very interesting keynote speakers from Oculus and Intel. One of the things they mentioned is it's not just the vision, but the audio cues, which are very, very important. And I remember when I tried Facebook Spaces, what made it for me so much more real was I could hear my colleague on the left and the other guy on the right. And to me, that made it immersive, while if it was not this kind of region, it would not make it. Do you have things in mind to make it even better?
So I think if you think about it, like audio is what tells your body where to look in that direction, right? It's your first cue. So on the Google side, we also believe very strongly about having spatialized audio, and so we do have certain tools available on our platform to help developers, content producers take advantage of the tools we provide by audio for their applications.
Okay. I want to go back to the community of pioneers. Unity, you have a big market share. I know that this is not the most important point. The most important is to add value to your developers. but is there things that you had assumed about the developers you have, and then when you actually talk to them or check with them on Twitter or whatnot, you realize, oh, I was wrong. My developers are 2 segments or 3 segments.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to acknowledge about the pioneers is that the pioneers aren't like, regular developers at all, or even regular game developers in the sense that, or app developers. They, they don't complain, right? They're used to. I mean, you'll still get some things, but like there'll be so many cases where I go and talk to a developer and be like, oh wow, you've been doing this for how long? Like this is how you got around this thing? And I mean, like these are individuals who have been working with like, alpha 3D printed hardware in some cases, and like, spending 3 days getting their their new controllers to sync, using the command line and some Bluetooth hacks kind of thing. We're starting to get out of that now, but just actually, starting to learn, have visibility into what, pain points are, and then somehow being able to predict, the things that will be helpful for, developers who don't even necessarily know what to ask for is really interesting. And there are several types of, developers now. There, at the beginning it was your sort of, we always see game developers as being the spearhead in a lot of emerging technology. But VR kind of started to blow up at the same time as the VFX industry started to clear out. So over time, I would notice, as an example, at the beginning of VR, when VR development was really involved in Unity, like the Oculus DK2 or the very first developer kit for the Vive, no one was using post-processing effects in VR. It was just basically unheard of because it would take 2 or 3 milliseconds of your time when you only have 11 at best. And so I went forward being a developer at that time, just always understanding, okay, VR developers are just never going to use post effects, and I just kind of closed the door on that. And then later, someone asked me, and I said, no, VR developers don't use post effects. And they're like, are you sure? Because I was talking to this developer and that developer before. And I was like, I think it's time I'm gonna survey this. So I surveyed, I think, like a couple hundred VR developers, and I found that almost half of them, by this point, were using post effects, and that's because there's this whole VFX community that moved into VR. And that was something I kind of understood, but I wasn't really paying attention to what the effects of that might be. And then, in a lot of cases, these folks are not going to, they're not going to go without their post effects. So we, made a renewed effort to make sure that those were performant and that they worked with all the optimizations for stereo rendering we're doing for VR. But that sort of thing kind of happens all the time. And we're seeing that again with mobile AR, for instance, and that we're having a lot of app developers who maybe developed on native platforms or didn't work with any sort of 3D engine previously, moving over now and developing for AR. They have their own set of expectations on how software should work, on what UI should be, and we have to make sure to account for that in how we interact with our users.
It's great, actually, because you can see the developers starting to evolve, or actually it's a new group joining in. Said, some Qualcomm, you have these reference designs, you have developers who work directly with you. Maybe you're more lucky and they complain more. What have you done so far from the developers you worked with?
I think from the developer perspective, on their interaction with us, it's a lot about technology, like the 6DAO, the accuracy, on how to use it, take advantage of the GPU, for example, of community rendering, of multi-view, of different features that we have on the platform. And for us, our aim with the platform is not as such as replacing actually quality. I think what we want is just giving a platform for people as a starting point. And actually our aim is really looking to the kind of Unity, Google, Oculus, Valve, all of those guys working on some kind of framework that would make it easy for the developer. Our intention is not definitely to have a platform that we're going to grow an ecosystem around it. It's more of a input. It's definitely an input. And that's how we position it to developers today. That's how, even we work with some, it's more for us to validate a platform. validate every feature that we have. Because a lot of things are happening, and sometimes we don't have time to wait for, let's say, Oculus or Daydream, because everyone is having its own specific today requirements and thinking on how to do things, and we gotta move. We gotta keep moving the ball, so we gotta get some of that content.
You want to kickstart this as fast as possible.
Right, absolutely.
But part of this, we discussed before, is also to get the content sticking on top of that.
You know, I don't know if you guys are familiar with OpenXR.
OpenXR, yeah.
This is, for me, an initiative that personally, I'm not speaking of Qualcomm, right?
Okay.
Personally, I think we need that kind of platform, and all of you guys are part of this forum because it simplifies life for developers, and you can build underneath it every type of engine, every type of platform, with Daydream, Oculus, or Unity, or any other type of engine in there. You just basically, we're talking about standards, right? We're talking about for you guys to write once and run across multiple platforms, across multiple devices. This is the kind of things that I think as an initiative, we should really push it as hard as we can.
And I think it translates in good user experience, it translates in lower cost for every consumer.
Right. So yeah, if you look, I think even when you look outside of China, it's okay. We have what? We have Daydream, we have Oculus, and fewer smaller vertical solutions. Look to China. China is a zoo in there about how many platforms that are just coming up.
And they are using VR a lot in malls, in shops, in whatnot. Yeah.
Everywhere. Now Vive is trying to do something about it. I don't know if any other guys trying to consolidate that, but it would be great because again, the aim is neither for me. I don't care actually if someone else coming as a platform. The problem here is not about competition. The problem is enabling that one. Just really get something that gets more content, good content, and simplify life. And because I was talking to some of the developers in another event, and most of them are telling me, it's hard to make money because not enough devices are out there. It's very hard. It's just like we're just breaking almost everything.
And this is where the Daydream initiative is really smart, because you get millions and millions of units very quickly. You start to have traction. Samsung with Facebook did something very smart too, where they get a lot of units. Because without that, you don't have content developers really having something to try on and to get enough traction and monetization. So maybe, let me ask Jeff the question. Mobile is the right way to kickstart, but it's a lot of friction. Standalone VR sounds like the right thing. It's untethered, you put it on, you're straight in the VR experience, you can enjoy it. Maybe you snack for 30 minutes and 45 minutes. You put it back, it can charge, it's always charged. When do you think that standalone VR, and of course the cost will go down like everything else, when do you think standalone VR will become the majority, the main platform for VR versus the mobile, which is a great way to kickstart, but it's too much friction to become the platform in 10 years, I guess. So.
Right. I guess at this point, I don't have any personal projections, but if you look at what IDC has forecasted, they show that for the foreseeable future into 2021, for the next 5 years or so, that mobile-based, screenless headsets are still going to be the vast majority of the volume in the marketplace. And I don't think that will necessarily change, because until VR becomes a well-established category like smartphones. Standalones, I think, will keep up with that rising tide as you have more people that convert from screenless headset viewers over into a standalone, but yet don't go all the way to a tethered experience. So I think that is a perfectly fine outcome. The numbers, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do see that if you look at the IDC numbers, that you start getting into the numbers of I think it was by 2021, it was like 9 million units shipped annually for standalones. So compared to a smartphone volume, not significant, right? But I think it's still very much early in the category establishment, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And until then, I think it's all about ushering and making sure that on the smartphone-based VR, that the user experience is good, that consumers get a taste of what a fully immersive VR experience is going to be, and then help them move over and feel like this becomes a share of my overall screen consumption behavior on a daily basis or a weekly basis that I want to go invest in a little bit more. And at the same time, that could be just for straight up consumers, but what about the potential applications in either like education or enterprise? That's still a good question to figure out. And I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to see how Windows and their mixed reality headsets with their Fall Creators Update, how that does well, because Microsoft is very well entrenched in the enterprise space, and they can cultivate a good ecosystem of software to facilitate the enterprise. And as those use cases get proven out and look for lower price points and inherently need more mobile use cases, then I think you're going to start seeing more of those types of applications getting ported over to a more mobile platform. I have every ambition to see how we can get those to go from the tethered environment to a mobile, but you have to span the gap between a Windows ecosystem over to Android, and that's not necessarily trivial.
All right, so mobile is to stay for quite some time. Before we move to augmented reality, which we haven't talked much, I want to move on to controllers. Because controllers is also linked to the immersive feeling of seeing your hands, right? And there are good initiatives of even having finger movements related to how you control it. And content providers may take advantage of these controllers. And today you have basically the full choice. You have no controllers, one controller, two controllers. So how do you see that moving forward? Because it's also the trade-off of cost and convenience, right?
So I mean, this is a huge part of the fragmentation as well, right? I remember when the first, if you look at even just the path of the Rift, at first we can see that people can just buy the Rift and use it like that, right? Just by itself, or with its little remote, which isn't a 3DOF remote or anything like that. It's just a button input that goes in. Then you have the Rift plus the Xbox controller. Right? Then you have the Rift plus the touch controllers, which previously you needed to buy separately. And we understand that usually the market for peripherals or the adoption rate of peripherals is usually pretty low, right? You guys are probably know better than me, but I understand it to be around 20% or something. So now, do you have developers wanting to make really cool experiences with, bimanual control or, two 6-DOF controllers, but then knowing that will be the smallest part of their market. Now with console VR, I think PSVR really proved it out by being so successful and having bimanual controllers that, we're seeing a lot of action there. I think that no one really wants the 3DOF controllers, right? It's a first step that's necessary to get started. There would be 6DOF if it was possible, and soon I imagine it will be possible. But I think that there's a lot that we can do. I've seen so far a lot of developers maybe not necessarily doing bimanual things, like let's say like tying shoelaces or something like that. You couldn't necessarily do with just one 3DOF controller, but it's really exciting to see what developers are doing so far. And I've seen things ported between Daydream with a 3DOF controller and Ordeal VR and a 3DOF controller to like a room scale game. And I think as long as you have mechanisms, you have good input systems and interaction systems and software, that can actually handle that. If you're smart about your UX, it actually doesn't end up being a huge challenge from, let's say, that is of course not accounting for, let's say, if Grandma learns the Daydream with the remote, right? And then all of a sudden she has two, or vice versa kind of thing. I guess I'm not really accounting for that challenge, but I think that it's all sort of eventually converging to the same thing. If you're looking really far out, it's probably just your hands. But I think at some point in the not too distant future, there will be this concept of us having bimanual 6-DOF control in both hands. And when Jeff, you probably know, right, how long it. Can you tell us any secrets or anything about what your team's thinking about for 6-DOF?
I can't necessarily share any specific concrete plans, but what I will say is that from a user experience perspective, when people get pitched the concept of virtual reality, they just assume it operates just like reality. And when you put a 3.3, which is a 3DOF headset and 3DOF controller, which is kind of the most popular type of VR headset with Gear VR and Daydream View, people have started realizing, wait, it's not moving the way that I expected. And then they all automatically now just think it's a compromised experience. So I think 6DOF controllers or 6DOF head tracking in a mobile form factor, that's kind of like a very holy grail for many of these platform companies. And you heard about Oculus wanting to pursue that with their Santa Cruz platform. And so we hear that loud and clear. And I think it's going to be important for anyone who wants to take VR seriously to go invest in that. And that will take content that you can experience in 6 degrees of freedom, and then also to have controllers that have 6 degrees of freedom. But like you alluded to, 6DOF controllers are hard to do, and currently they're a little bit more expensive to manufacture. So there has to be some continued innovation there and development to really make sure that the user experience works out well, and that it is intuitive, it's natural, that there is no perceived compromise of the experience, but not drive the cost point to a point that it becomes out of reach for the mainstream consumer.
Right, a lot of it ends up being a design problem, right? I mean, I think one of your guys' early demos with Shell Games was a frying pan demo with 3DOF, right? Which you don't feel actually too handicapped by not being able to, have 6 degrees of freedom, because all you want to do is flip anyways, or experiences where I just want to point at things. But if I start giving affordances that someone might expect 6 degree of freedom movement, and they can't do that, then it starts to make it seem like it's a hardware problem.
Yeah, there's some creative workarounds today with elbow models. So you can take 3 degrees of freedom and assume that you have an elbow that the user's generally resting by their hip, and you just take the IMU data and you just kind of infer that there is a little bit of 6 degrees of freedom movement. And that's relatively easy to do, and both Oculus and Daydream, they both implement that. But if you really want to crack the nut on use cases for learning, collaboration, you can only do so much with a 3DOF controller. So that's why the 6DOF controllers are going to be really important to catalyze the adoption.
So Said, I'm not sure how much you can say, but...
I know it all. No, I think let's go back to the first point that we were talking about where VR should be, about being intuitive with interactions, etc. So 6DOF is no question. We just win. I just want to remind us that it's not we're not too late. VR, just if you remember the phone, you remember those phones with the antenna and you have to hold it like this? That's where we are today on VR. There's still a long road for us and a long thing that we need to experiment, right? As you know, there are a lot of experiments today. I haven't seen a good 6DOF controller yet. Hopefully, pretty soon, we start seeing something good, and then you can start using them and implementing content with that. But I'm sure it's something that is going to be required. Cost needs to come down, as just like Brad and pointing out. And performance needs to be unquestionable. Latency and all of that needs to be dealt with. So it's not a question.
So let's move to augmented reality a bit. Facebook announced the camera SDK, single camera. We had Apple announcing AR Kit, Google announcing AR Core. They had Tango, which was dual camera, depth sensing. So now we clearly see augmented reality, single camera start to happen. And we're talking massive volumes on mobile for that. So how do you see augmented reality with a mobile device in your hands becoming the platform for a killer app? Why would people no longer go back to a phone that's not augmented reality enabled? You can, whoever jumps first.
Sure. I think mobile AR is just a good step. And it won't take too long for people to figure out, hey, if I want to have an AR experience, I have to hold something. And my hands are taken. I mean, just imagine you're taking a video. So when you're taking, this is one of the problems I have when I'm taking video with my phone. Let go with, I have to look to something and I start it's just like the Pokemon Go phone. There will be good introduction to AR. But as soon as we fix all the challenges that we have today to get to glasses, it's going to go there.
So let me challenge you a bit, because augmented reality on mobile, there is a clear intent. You took your mobile out of your pocket, you start with whatever layer app, it's very clear. Once it's on the glasses, how do you tell it's your intent? You're not going to have the person removing and putting it back.
You mean, how do you tell if you're in AR or not?
No, how do you say, okay, I want to search for real estate price around me, or restaurants, or how do you decide which layers you want to see? How do you signal your intent?
Right, how about you have that view that you will see on the phone in your glasses, yet still, you can say to your phone, you can say just like voice command, you can still use your application from your phone actually and tell this is what I want. The only thing is, I just want to walk as a normal person, not looking to my phone, holding my phone, and as I'm walking to tell me where should I go, like I have it here. And also it tells me, you know what, the simplest application I suggest for that, just imagine the smartwatch. I just want my ER glass to be that smartwatch. I get a text, I get any notification, I can say it here. I can look here, oh, this is Nicolas. It tells me exactly who you are, on Facebook and whatnot. This is the kind of simple application that I'm looking. It's like, if you take the phone, there is just as much you can do. But we have to go through that. This is the first step. We have to do it. It's going to take us maybe a few years until we fix all the issues that we have. Because the problem to get here, to get something that a consumer can use, you have issues with optics, with the display, with like the thermal, all kind of things.
Do you think it will be like Snap? They did this very nice unbundling of single use case, very pure. Do you think that will be the first of the augmented reality glasses?
I think it will be, the way I look at it today, and from the now view that we have, is it's going to be two types of devices. There will be devices that are more for design. That's like ODG type devices, where you need a lot of computation. It's going to be heavy. You have the type of screen that's different. And then there will be a type of device just for delivery, for content delivery. You have some level of content, be it text or some level of it. The way I look at it today is, this is the first part for consumer. This is the first, it's going to go enterprise. So all the guys that are investing today in heavy applications like with the slant, with the constriction, blind detection, light estimation, all of those features, if you want to put all of that in your standalone VR, you're going to have challenges with the design, and then it's going to be bulky. If it's bulky, not great for the consumer.
And expensive.
And expensive too. Like most of them now, like 1,000 plus, right? So for the consumer, definitely I do see the type of spectacles as a perfect kind of design for me at least to use. I can put them, you can see, and eventually maybe in about 5 to 10 years, I can go to VR in that, and it can be as well on AR.
And then we get to XR.
And then this, goodbye.
Goodbye, so you would stop using your mobile at that.
Why would you need my mobile?
You see that too?
I'm not exactly in the AR space directly myself, so I don't really have some actual credentials to be able to contribute to that. But I do think that if we look at just VR in general, one of the challenges is that you have something that's on your face. You have a very high standard of what goes on your face, right? This is your appearance to the rest of the world. This is what expresses who you are. So for you to want to have something persistent on your face, it has to deliver significant value, or it has to be completely seamless. And that's a very strong like spectrum for you to be in. So I expect that in the long term, at the end state, it will be as seamless as your current spectacles, where it's just blended in and the optics are figured out. The compute is also compact, and you will just wear it like you wear corrective lenses. But until that happens, and it is still clunky, like for example with Google Glass, some people thought simplistic, minimalist design. The compute was tucked away behind the curvature of your head. It was fairly minimalist, but nonetheless, there's that small little weird piece of glass that was floating in front of you people that made you look slightly differently. You weren't paying attention. That was socially awkward. in those particular cases, then it's still not enough to be a persistent, ubiquitous type of use case. It'll still be fairly episodic. But then you have to ask the question, well, when am I going to carry a piece of like eyewear with me, and for what particular use case? So it goes back to, if you're job dependent on it, you probably bring it. If you needed to accomplish a very specific task that you couldn't do otherwise, then you would bring it. So I am more focused on looking at AR to deliver those types of use cases, so that you're actually more compelled as a user to bring something through your face like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phones are going to basically help us understand this new paradigm. Right? Get users and developers and platforms and everything used to this idea that of the camera, basically. The camera is king, essentially. You know, there's data collection. It's our new lens, right? So if I need more information about something, rather than opening an app, you know, I'll use the camera. The camera all of a sudden becomes the context, the search, everything. And I think we can build that up on phones before we jump across. And it could be a very smooth transition in the sense that, you know, we've talked about computation and stuff. I don't think that, you know, the majority of any computation will be done in the headsets themselves. It'll either be done remotely or by something you carry like this, right? So it's not too hard to think that when there's headsets, I would still either have a watch or a mobile device like this at the same time and actually do things like, okay, if I want to shut it off, like you were mentioning, right? But I actually interface with it through my watch or my phone. Yeah. But if you look at the information that just the data floating around how we use our phones right now and how we're using that through services which are in turn taking the data and doing all sorts of things with it. You know, the context will be understood. If we talked about, I'm not sure the intent was the word you used, right? I think, you know, there's already so much intent that can be inferred. You know how like you'll go and you'll swipe right on your iPhone or something like that to look for an app or something like that. It'll be like the first suggestion. Or you go to search on something in Google and it's like, oh my, you know, like it already basically knows because I mean you have context of time. You know, so you have your patterns and your rhythms and you know once you start to have even more things like what I was talking about, who I was just with. If I was just at the doctor's office, chances are I'll probably go to the pharmacy afterwards, kind of thing, right? Like, so you knows when you work, who else you work with, and sort of things, and then you start to get like, you know, behavioral data and everything like that you know that is historically been used for advertising, right? But I think that's, you know, a fairly barbaric kind of, you know, application of all that data. And so moving forward, yeah, I think the intent will be pretty obvious. There will be there'll be less and less occasions where you would actually want to correct it.
So I'm going to open to questions, but I'm going to give you a plug, because I was in Hong Kong Qualcomm Summit last week, and I was so impressed with one of the presentations that shows how you could start to think about using 5G for VR, AR. Can you make the audience dream about what that could mean and new form factors and whatnot?
Yeah, no, definitely. And 5G is really a holy grail for us because it's going to solve a lot of issues that we have today as we're talking about computation, as we're talking about, I need more. It's just like, more you put computation here, you need more. More you're going to put here, you need more. It's just like indefinite like need for things to do. And the 5G, we feel like 5G is going to like solve a lot of those issues, because what 4G today is not maybe solving. It gives you like 1 gig of 4G. It's giving you enough bandwidth, but the problem is latency. It's not optimized for latency. 5G is going to be, and everyone is expecting 5G is going to be the saver for us. And 5G is going to have basically that connectivity to everything, not only phones anymore. Now it's going to be for anything that you have at home, like anything is going to have to be connected to 5G. So once you have that, and once you have the VR or AR or something in the middle, you have the 5G, suddenly you have that pipeline, that wide pipeline to a lot of things that you can run the cloud, right? And you get access to the data. And that's why I said goodbye to the phone, because our vision is that one of the phone, because the smartphone, if you remember again, the phone when it started just like evolution, and somebody had this. But what's next for this? What's the next form? We believe that one of the forms that the phone is going to be just that glass that you wear. I'm not going to call it AR glass or VR glass. It's the XR glass that you're wearing. You can make calls. You can like get access to the data. You can do whatever you're doing today using the smartphone, right? Because the moment your display is moving here, right? Once we solve all the issues that we're talking about, you have the phone move, like the display is here. The computation is moving here. You have 5G. Why do you need this?
Actually, you don't necessarily need a lot of computation anymore on your
Exactly,
device.
because that 5G now is giving you access to that pipeline to get all the heavy.
So let's be clear. You heard about the death of mobile here at SDC 2017. All right, I'm opening for questions. Let's give a microphone. Yes.
You talked about 6 degrees being like the holy grail for the hand controllers. Do you have a sense for what the threshold is for price? In other words, when the price gets down to X, then things are going to start to take off.
I'm just gonna say $100 for everything. I mean, really, like if we look at, we talk about mobile VR being cheap. It's only cheap because everyone already has a mobile phone, right? Because we tell them that they absolutely need it. But in a lot of cases, these are like $600 or $800 things, right? When we're talking about something separate than that doesn't yet have this application, I mean, if you look at, this is basically a very smart business person that I knew was basically looking at, adoption of new technologies based on price and everything like that. And he came to the conclusion of like, we will see that like maximum pickup basically when I can get everything that I need for VR for around $100, which is really cheap. We're pushing it. I mean, that's why we've got Qualcomm working on it here.
It's your chance to comment.
Maybe I was about to say $99. It's good to be $99.
There was a marker.
Yeah. But no, definitely, I think to make sense to have it, I mean, because there are steps. First of all, introduction, right? Once you introduce it, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, mostly. But to talk about scale, I think we have to think about a package. You can't just like that game of you buy the HMD and you have to buy the controller. It's just the users are not going to like this. I bought this, and they have to buy then again the controller, and then I have to pay you guys to get the application, and I have to continue paying. That's just not a scalable model. I think for the hardware, it has to be just like what Oculus Go did. Control is part of the package. You get it out, it's part of the package. I'm hoping we can work, and we are working like with the teams here to get to as low as possible in pricing. But I hope we can hit the $199. That's probably.
Yeah, one last thing too. We talk about
$19.99, right?
Yeah, $99, sure. We talked about the standalone thing and the controller thing now, and I think one thing that would be really, really interesting to watch and learn from, I can't wait, is the Lenovo kind of Star Wars VR thing that's going to come out around Christmas. Not that I can't wait to play it, I'm sure, I've got enough VR in my life right now, but the really, really exciting thing will be seeing how this is perceived and how it's picked up and how many sales there are and who can figure it out and who can't. Like we're all going to learn so much then.
Being a software platform, we don't really look at hardware and bill of material cost targets, so we're really focused on delivering the best user experience. But I would just echo that from a consumer standpoint, part of the value proposition for standalone VR is everything that you need, all in one package, done, get going with parent, and then you're done. So we really have to work in close concert with our silicon partners to drive towards those cost targets. But I think the magical $199 or $99 price segments is there for a reason for all these other gaming consoles, because that is just, I think, almost based off of historical consumer expectation that something like that would do it. But Also, another way of looking at it is how much value you're going to provide. I think if you look at mainstream consumer, they're going to think completely different. In an enterprise context, if you have a 6-stop controller that provides above and beyond a certain KPI for accuracy, precision, that enables them to accomplish something that they couldn't do otherwise, then the pricing target totally changes. And it really comes down to looking at pricing strategies 101 that most MBAs will have to do for that sort of analysis.
Just on the TDK side, I got my microphone. So.
You have to speak to this one. This is the one for the audience.
Oh, it's tough on me now. But on TDK side, we really look at performance and making sure the overall system BOM cost is as low as possible. Because at the end, if we want the market to adopt one, hopefully 2 controllers, get super good content on top of it, it only happens if you match both performance and total BOM cost. So we are very focused on this. All right, next question. Oh.
Hi, I'm just wondering about room scale VR versus this, past gaming experience where you're sitting on the couch, and because I think it affects, design of the input controllers, design of the content, and the whole immersive experience. We see the Omni where you can kind of run, but it's still an expensive thing and a big thing to have in your living room. So how much of next year's content is sort of room scale and immersive in that sense versus a traditional, gaming where you have your controllers but you're sort of sitting down?
So I mean, even if you are sitting down, you still have that level of immersion, right? Because you can move around, and if you move your hands and heads, you do have that 100% tracking. It is tough to say. We talk about fatigue a lot, and when one thing I'm really interested in is new creative mediums using using VR in particular, things like tilt brush, medium, and everything like that. And it could be that I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, right? But in some ways, television and video games initially, right, had us much more sedentary, right? But that was largely a result of them just being so immobile, such, for the first tube TVs, right, that would take you and your whole family to get that thing into the house. You're not going to move that, right? So you always watch it from one spot. You get your butt proof and everything, right? And then, consoles, you sit down, you've got this, controller that's designed to be held and you're most laziest kind of thing. But if we look at maybe even AR in something arguably AR-ish, Pokemon Go, right? That had people moving in the opposite direction kind of thing. So people are in parks and all that kind of stuff and actually getting out there. And if we look at going back to the art thing, right? In most cases, painters, fine artists kind of thing would be standing up, right? Would be actors looking around the easel at something kind of thing. And so that's not too far of a stretch. Where we go into, say, the first step of digital painting, where of course, once again, you're tied to this big bulky equipment and your Wacom tablet that weighs 50 pounds kind of thing, then you're more sedentary again. But I think that it's possible that we could actually move back, and it's not too much to ask for someone to just move a little bit or stand up. It seems impossible right now because that's really what we've been stuck in for so long.
Any couch experience?
Yeah, I think it's just to that point. I guess once it's up, because right now the room scale is, availability to developers, I feel like it's still limited. Once we have that in the standalone device, because you have room scale and then you have this difficult system to set up, it's still difficult really to play it as well. It's still difficult to enjoy it. Imagine now you're standalone, or you're even tethered, I would say, even though it's not in the plan right now. But we have it in the plan for the standalone. You have it because you're free. You can move. It makes a lot more sense. You will feel like you want to do it as well. It's just with room scale comes the issue of safety, right? You have to make sure that you have safety. For me, there is no room scale without safety. Because today, I don't know if this happens when you have a VR. You give it to someone, what do? Oh, harmony. And you start guiding them, right? it's just not a good experience. Room scale is just like the 6DoF controller. It has to be there, and it has to have safety along with it. Then, I mean, once it's available, developers, depending on the application, because there are games like, just you mentioned, I want to sit down. But let's go a little bit out of the gaming aspect of it. I want to learn. I want to go visit a museum. I'm in a concert, right? Then suddenly the room scale has a place, not just in the sense of play or communication. I'm talking, we are collaborating, and we have a board, right? And we're just talking and we're moving from one place to a place. Suddenly the room scale plays a big role.
All right, 2 more questions.
So, in the realm of toys and games for young children, you've already mentioned Pokemon Go, which was a big hit, and you mentioned the little lightsaber thing's getting a lot of press, although it's not proven yet. Do any of you have any thoughts on trends in that part of the market?
Yeah. So I think this isn't something. I mean, we've seen it. We haven't seen it necessarily explode yet. But if you look at like a lot of the things that Euphoria has been doing over the last few years, just from recognizing images and now recognizing shapes. I don't think we've seen it explode enough to really be able to say anything clear on it. But to me, it only makes sense that if I take any sort of traditional board game, right, or anything to do with Lego, or anything to do with a building connect type thing, that really anything could be augmented, and maybe on the more cynical side of things, like monetized, more with some sort of augmented reality component. So I think now as we see like augmented reality really come to the mainstream, within the next year, I would expect to see everyone from Lego to Hasbro having AR components in their things, and we'll check back here next year and see if I was right.
No, I completely just support what Brad said. I think that it just launched. It's very AR Kit, AR Core just launched. I think that will play a big role. And I think to your point, Nicolas, before, every premium device is going to have actually AR. And what's going to drive that is, again, those type of applications. Yeah, and definitely, if you are a developer of gaming, this is a chance. This is a big opportunity for you.
But if you think about augmented reality on mobile, this year we had 3 big players announcing availability of SDK. This is huge. So you could say this 2017 is a kickstart for augmented reality on mobile. I can't imagine the content we get next year with that.
I think for toys and games, or just AR content in general, it's going to be a really exciting year because for the first time you have these major platforms that will support AR development. And with programs like, for example, on the Google side, we have AR Core, as you all know. And with Google Lens, where you can take a snapshot of any object and using computer vision and machine learning comes back and says, this is a particular type of flower that only grows in the temperate climates of New Zealand, as an example. That you can augment that information panel on top of what you're seeing that helps children or even adults to be able to learn a little bit more and immerse more in that physical presence, right? Specifically to your question about toys and games, I think the AR use cases are going to be much more acceptable for parents and their children because parents want to be more involved with what content their children are consuming. And when you have a smartphone device where you can mutually both see the screen and you can walk through whatever they're looking and help explain it, parents are going to feel at ease. And then children will feel like this is also an open invitation for anyone who's around looking at the screen to participate in that experience. I know that I would personally feel a little uneasy about my child going to a completely occluded experience, and I have no idea what my child is looking at, right? And of course, there's workarounds for that, but given that where we are with the advent of these AR platforms, I think when you look at entertainment or media for children or for adults, it will start blending in some of these things from like computer vision, like the Google Lens example I told you about, and augmenting it just to provide a little bit more, just really surfacing the metadata that exists on these separate devices and then bridging it over so that you can see what you're looking at.
All right, I think we spent a good amount of time on this question, so I think we will close for now. Please join me to thank these great panelists.